On June 9th, 2021, the first chapter of a new manga, Killer of the Reincarnated, Cheat Slayer, was published in the monthly Dragon Age magazine. Written by Humura Kawamoto and illustrated by Aki Yamaguchi, this manga was going to be a parody of the Otherworld, or Isekai genre, where a man battles people who were reincarnated into his world. There was one main issue though, which would cause the manga to be cancelled both on Twitter and from being published. The main antagonists in this manga were parodies of isekai manga protagonists. Before we go any further, let's talk about the story's plot. The story begins with the protagonist, Lute, stating his respect for those who had been reincarnated into his world. He preaches their heroics to his childhood friend, Lydia, and states that he wishes to be a reincarnated's companion. Unfortunately, their conversation is interrupted by the news of a fire, and suddenly a figure appears and paralyzes Lute. Remember when I said the reincarnated were the villains of the story? Well, they're here to destroy and pillage the village. Lute is paralyzed as this happens, and he is forced to witness his friend getting brutally assaulted by his idols. Then the story shifts to the capital city, where we are introduced to the villains, and this is where the controversy really begins. We have Kurito, who is a parody of Kirito from Sword Art Online, Honda, who is meant to be Subaru from ReZero, Lewis, who is meant to be Shin from Wise Man's Grandchild, Flare, who is Aqua from Konosuba, Imerda, who is Katarina from My Next Life as a Villainess, Anastasia, or Tanya from Saga of Tanya the Evil, Roro, or Rimuru from That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, Yukiko, or Aletta from Restaurant to Another World, and finally, Dawn Will Dead, or Ainz from Overlord. As you can see, these characters are not well separated from their isekai counterparts, and this is what caused the major controversy, but more on that later. After the introductions, we return to Lute, where he wakes up and is greeted by a witch. She states that she saved Lute, and that unfortunately magic cannot bring back the dead, which is pretty ironic coming from a person living in a world ruled by the reincarnated. The witch explains what happened in the village and informs Lute that she knew what the reincarnated were like before their reincarnations. Lute's first job is to bring Lewis, or not Shin, to the witch so she can teach him how to kill the reincarnated. Sometime later, Lute pays a visit to Lewis, where he finds him abusing women. Lewis recognizes Lute, causing him to attack, but this is stopped when Lute calls out Lewis for being a NEET in his previous life. Lewis is confused, and the chapter ends with Lute inviting Lewis over for tea. As you can guess, people were super outraged by this manga. There were two main issues that people were upset by, which is that the characters were pretty much other people's characters, with name and personality changes, and that the beloved characters were doing horrible things to other people. The fact that Kawamoto and Shobo had the characters designed to look like characters they were parodying upset a lot of people. Many Japanese readers took to Twitter, bashing the author and illustrator duo for their work. There was a lot of just criticism, but at the same time, there was just as many death threats and similar type stuff. This outrage caught the attention of readers from around the world, and more people began to look into Cheat Slayer. Several major industry figures, such as the author of Mushoku Tensei, were critical of Cheat Slayer. He stated that making characters appear who are recognizably borrowed from characters from other works, and then turning them into villains and making them do vile things was crossing the line. The people who allowed Cheat Slayer to be published were also criticized for allowing Cheat Slayer to be published. Twitter users stated they should have been more conscientious about what they were publishing, and that they should not have allowed Cheat Slayer to be published in the state that it was in. It is important to note that, although I am talking about valid criticisms, I am still talking about Twitter, so there were plenty of random hate posts from people who had no idea what they were even talking about. After the Twitter cancellation, the actual publishing company canceled the publishing of Cheat Slayer. Following this, Kawamoto apologized over Twitter, stating that they regret overdoing their parody and will be more mindful of others' work when creating manga. Similarly, the publishing company also issued an apology to the creators whose characters were parodied, and for the most part, the creators were pretty chill about it. Despite the controversy, it is hard to argue that Cheat Slayer did not have potential. An isekai story that did not have a reincarnated protagonist is pretty uncommon on its own, and someone who is seeking out the reincarnated to kill them is just on a whole nother level. Cheat Slayer could have been the much-needed breath of fresh air in an oversaturated genre, but the controversy ruined any potential it could have had. Anything with a similar premise will now just be called a copycat, and it is sad how one mistake can get a potentially good story cancelled. I do not agree with the not-so-subtle parody, but man, this story really could have been something. It has been almost a year since the Cheat Slayer controversy, and now Kawamoto is working on a new gambling manga. But tell me your thoughts about the controversy in the comments below. I'm interested to see what you all have to think about Cheat Slayer. Well, that is it for now. Thank you for watching. Later, gamers.